Hey everyone, this is Peter Wilson. I'm from Four Trips Ahead, and my solo album Freedom's Door is out now. I want you to make sure that you listen to Jake and Music Existence right now.
Welcome back, Peter Wilson. Thanks so much for coming on, man.
Thanks for having me, Jake. It's great to see you, brother.
The last time we talked was back in March 2017. You were with your band Four Trips Ahead. You released the album And the Fire Within, and that was released during a coincidentally heated, very political sort of time. And inadvertently, all of those things affected the record, affected everyone's perception of the record. But in general, what do you observe about the tenacity of your fans that have stuck by you, especially as you've gone on to doing the solo record?
That's a great question, Jake. Wow, you're coming out of the gate not playing around. Um, yeah, I mean, so there were a couple of things with that. That was and the Fire Within was really a great. It's something I'm super proud of. I think Four Trips Ahead, we decided to make a very bold, heavy statement, just dig into who we were in terms of our sound, in terms of our message, in terms of just kind of not worrying about trends or anything else out there, and just really making a terrific record with songs that were powerful and so forth. And what was great about that is I felt like I've been feeling like that we've been kind of building this momentum. And I think people were really enjoying us performing, and we were getting this great positive feedback. And I think we were just writing, we got into the zone writing. And I feel like that zone for me as a writer for the last 7 years, even with the pandemic and everything, kind of I feel like my antennas have been up in a way that maybe in other parts of my life they haven't quite been before. And I think you tapped into that energy on that album. And so we made that record and it did very well for us. And we ended up linking up with the current label that we're on, Dr. Music Records, that really picked up on it and gave it kind of a second life, which was really great too, because we kind of were out and we're getting a lot of great feedback, building our fan base, and then we got kind of the label decided to put it out more generally, so we got a really good distribution, and it kind of heightened our heightened our position in like this music industry, whatever that means. So people started to pay attention to us in a different way, and then we started recording a new record. And during that time, I've been recording a solo record for a bit and like talking and working with people. But then we were in the middle of recording a Four Trips record, and then the pandemic happened, and we were able to finish like half the album because half of it was actually tracked, and we decided to go for it and release it as an EP, which was the Remnants EP in 2020, 2020, 2021, and that was really fantastic too. And to your question about fans, we're really excited that people really took to the songs, really connected with it. And during that time, I was writing with other folks and building what is become, my solo record, Freedom's Door. And so there was all this creativity kind of abounding. And then we had this pandemic, and it was kind of weird, and things were frozen, and we weren't sure what was happening. And we finished. Four Trips had finished the EP. We finished all the mixing and doing everything, like literally virtually doing stuff, listening, sending mixes to one another. So it was a weird time. But then when the pandemic lifted, I was really set on making sure that I released a solo record, um, because of just this real connection with Four Trips Ahead fans and people that just were asking me what I was up to in music. And I really felt I had a lot to say and I had a statement to make. And so we kind of came back together, and everyone that had been playing on what were my solo tracks on Freedom's Door came together, and we finished the record properly. And it's just been really, it's been very exciting and self-satisfying, you know what I mean, to kind of put out this record and really get the support from my label, Dr. Music Records, and also just having the support of people in the industry who really like what I do. And so it's particularly special. And Four Trips Ahead fans are really excited about it. I'm getting great response, um, and it's also they're excited, I think, because they know it's not like the end of the band at all. It's actually quite the contrary. Everyone's kind of stretching out and putting out projects within the band, but we're recording new material too. So it's just really great that I have, and I don't take this lightly, that I have fans, and the band has fans that really are interested in music, really care about my voice and what I'm trying to say, and support. They don't see it as like, oh, was he going off and doing this for? They kind of are get that, hey, this is another extension or something else, but they know that that both can exist. And that's, even though there are a lot of issues in the music industry, one of the cool things about breaking down barriers and kind of deciding your own fate with your music when you're putting it out, is that you don't have to follow these laws and say, oh no, well, the label only wants to promote the band right now and you have to wait. We can just be creative, put out things, and have people that support it and kind of promote it.
Yeah. And it's another thing too to emphasize your your fans care about you as much as your members of Four Trips Ahead. They're very encouraging. They want you to still, even at this stage, find your voice. You always are bombarded to any degree with stories of, oh, I started this solo career or this solo record because I don't want to have anything to do with that band. They don't mean shit to me. Or, you know, some artists might pull a 180 on their fans and go solo just to, flip them off for no apparent reason at all.
Yeah, it's funny the way you said that. Yeah, it's very, you're right. I'm not this solo record was very much just kind of born slowly. There were a lot of things that happened in my life personally. I wanted to stretch. I felt like there were certain things I was writing that wouldn't quite fit in the Four Trips Ahead canon, and that's okay. Because I feel like I feel very blessed, to be playing in a band with not only people that are great musicians and writers, but are just people I really love as people. So I think we all value that friendship, and there's a lot of connection there. So this record is kind of born out of just me taking another journey. And also there were some songs and material that I'd written years ago that I thought was really great that more people should hear. And I kind of wanted to reinterpret some of that. And then there were brand new things that I wanted to try and write with different people. And so having the ability to do both of those things and still having that like love from not just fellow band members, but just people around our circle was really, really great and very encouraging. And to your point about the 180, yeah, I'm not I love all sorts of types of music. I listen to everything, literally. But I'm, as a writer, my foundations are hard rock. It's kind of like what I do. So I felt like it wasn't like I was trying to write a record that was like, oh, we're going to explore the acoustic side of Peter, with the sensitive acoustic
That
side of Peter.
everyone's just going to be
Or
like, no.
yeah, right. And fans, fans like, and I've been one of those fans where you're like, okay, you're holding your breath, and sometimes you're pleasantly surprised,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Sometimes if I think about like when I like for example, I'll give you the example of Alice in Chains, which is one of the few bands that have done that successfully to me. Because I felt like even though they went
Post
acoustic,
Lane transition.
right, right, of course. But when Lane was with us, them doing like Sap and then them doing Jar of Flies, I never got the sense that they were doing it to be like, hey, we want to widen our audience. I got it because they were like, this is where the muse is going. So we're kind of going with it. But the grittiness of their lyric, the heaviness of the message, like I mean, stuff like Nutshell lyrically is so just as heavy as Angry Chair or something like that, right? So it wasn't so strange for me. It wasn't like that. But there are artists that kind of go and do this kind of 180 thing where it's like a little too obvious that they're trying to get like pop cred or they're trying to get indie cred. Sometimes it's pop artists trying to do the indie thing, where you're like, what are you doing?
Yeah,
That's
like
not
Our
like,
Lady Peace did that thing.
oh gosh, you're mentioning a band I really like, and I don't like to name names, right? I was thinking actually, like when I was thinking of the pop thing, I was thinking of kind of like Justin Timberlake tried to make that weird indie records, like I don't know what was going on, but like, and it's not like I'm a big fan of his music, but I kind of get like he had kind of a thing going, and a lot of his fans were like, "What is this? This is not." It didn't feel like real. It felt like he was like, "Oh, this is where a lot of the music industry is going, so I'm going to go that way." And I think you have to be really careful when you do that. If your muse is there and you follow it, I think you'll always be successful. Because at the end of the day, and I know this sounds very cliche, but at the end of the day, you have to live with the music that you create. You have to live with the art that you make. And if you don't believe in it, for me as a singer, I can't sell it. I can't perform it. I can't talk about it with people like you because if I don't believe it, I don't believe it. When I write and I really know it's good, and we wrote quite a lot for this record. We picked there's a bunch of songs that some of them are really great that didn't make the record that were even like mixed and kind of got to a point, and we were like, no, we got to make some choices. But I believe in everything that I write and I work with, whether it's my solo album or whether it's with Four Trips Ahead. So it's never a problem for me to perform it or talk about it or even sometimes defend it if people are, give it a kind of crap review in your head. I'm like, no, man, I believe this. You just didn't get it, and that's okay. But like it's always disheartening for me to see artists that kind of do that because then what ends up happening is you chase the trend and maybe even you sell a couple of records, right? But then you lost a lot of why you did this. And then people, your new audience kind of wants you to keep going in that direction. And maybe your old audience that really believed in you kind of was like, what's going on. Our Lady Peace is kind of an interesting thing for me because I kind of feel like in my head, after Gravity, maybe, um, and even Gravity, like I think there were some places where I was like, you know, um, but I loved a lot of their music a lot. Like I thought their first five records or so, or six records were just tremendous. I always buy their stuff because I'm always hoping like, well, maybe this will be the one, like didn't they do like they did a part two to Spiritual Machines, and I
Yeah,
love
yeah,
Spirit.
yeah.
Yeah, and I love Spiritual Machines. I love that record. I think it's a hidden gem in the United States, definitely. I mean, their Canadian audience and their fans know how great that record is. That was to me them at their height. And when they did a kind of a second part to it, I got really excited. I thought, okay, maybe they're kind of coming back. I didn't hate the record, but I was kind of like, it's not quite. It's a weird thing. The Muse is it's a tricky thing to kind of connect with, and you as an artist and as a interviewer and as a fan of music understand that, right? Like if you're good to the muse, it'll take you places. She'll take you places. I usually personify
Yeah,
her as
yeah.
a her, right? She'll take you places and it'll be really rewarding. And in the case of collaborating with people that are great, it can go like the new Four Trips Ahead stuff. I'm so excited for people to hear, probably come out next year, but I'm super excited because I think people will be like, wow, like they see the growth. And like, I mean, there are a couple songs where I'm like, I can't wait till people hear this. That's how I felt about the record of my album of Freedom's Door. Like, I couldn't wait for people to hear this. I had it done and I'm sitting on it. And I'm like so excited. I was bursting and now I'm able to talk about it. The muse took me to places and I think kind of thanked me. Sometimes commercially it won't thank you, but musically and artistically, if it thanks you and it gives you, it's this reciprocal relationship, you'll have that muse, it'll follow you. Sometimes it's a little quieter than other times it's like it's too loud. There are times where I can't sleep because I'm writing down things, and I kind of take it for what it is. I do think though, and I know this sounds really kind of maybe a little corny, but I definitely am of the belief as an artist and as a musician, if you betray the muse a lot and you play with it a lot, it can become really a difficult road for you to get back to it if you ever can. And I think that and I'm with changing. I mean, like, listen, there's some people like Glenn Hughes who are like 70 whatever and are rock star rockers who just keep making this heavy, amazing music, whether it be his solo stuff or Black Country Communion, or or even when he did the California Breed record or what have you. And he is swimming in the muse. He's just living it. He's about it. Some of his records are less seen and bought, others are higher profile, but he's about the voice and the muse and the writing and the feel, and you can feel it as an artist or as a fan of the music that he's about it no matter what. And then there are other people that I think are really big artists that I've liked a lot of their stuff in the past. And I feel like the muse is something's happened and it's like kind of dissipated. And at best, you're getting kind of these shadows of what the muse once was, and I know I might piss off a lot of people by saying this, but I think about U2 like that big time. I think Bono and the whole crew, they were swimming in that muse for a long time and made some of the most important music. And then something happened where it just like kind of flatlined. And like these last records of theirs, as a fan, as someone that respects them immensely, it's sometimes it's heartbreaking because you're like, oh, like, gosh, what's going on? It's the same four guys. Why can't it? What's going on here? What's happening here? And then you have other cases where the muse might dissipate for a bit and something changes in the recipe or the energy that's going on, and this like the inspiration comes back and comes back hard. And like for me, as a metal guy, also like Judas Priest is a great example of that. Like, who knew that they were going to come out with these two records, and their latest record is incredible. It's like some of their best music, and we're like in uncharted territory. It's very inspiring for me because I know in my age, like I can be older and still make kick-ass heavy music, not compromise who I am, and make music that matters, that attracts younger people. It doesn't lose my audience, and it's real. You can see when the guys are even doing the videos or whatever, they're really into it, and it's super exciting for me to see that. So and so I say in the case of Priest, right, there were definitely years where they were kind of floating in this ether. And I think Rob had it, Halford had it for certainly his solo stuff, but the muse wasn't connecting as well with the band even when he rejoined. And now, with stuff happening and players switching, something happened. And like that muse is like, here I am again. And some of it's the producer they're working with, Andy Sneap, who's amazing. Some of it's the new band members that they have. But whatever has happened, it's there. So I try, with my solo stuff with Freedom's Doors to really respect that and to really like be true to it, be true to who I am, and be better at what I do.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, Freedom's Door, it came out April 5th. We talked a little bit about the process of the album, and as far as what transpired during the making of the album, um, to get right into it, you lost both your parents, which I've seen you talk about. I've seen you share photos, and they are nothing short of remarkable people. And
Thank you.
and during that time, you also had your son, who is a remarkable, upstanding young man. And with these events happening, um, do you feel compelled to write immediately, or with the overwhelming nature of them, does it take time to process?
Wow, that's a great question, Jake. Um, hmm. I don't know if there's a neat answer for that. Um, Sometimes, I think most of the time, you kind of allow the events occur, and then you're just kind of washed in it. With the passing of both of my parents, they both passed within like a 2 year period. It was kind of weird because I was just starting to be able to climb out of some of the dark places I was losing my dad, and then I lost my mom. And so it definitely like you grow up in a different way. Although I will be honest, I think the grief with my mother was a different thing because when you lose your first parent, if you're lucky to have both your parents around, with you throughout your life, when you lose your first parent, it hits you in a way that you've never you never can really describe until it happens to you. It's a very strange, jarring feeling. It's like your world goes off its axis a bit if you're close. And then losing both of them, even as ridiculous as it sounds, I'm obviously an adult losing both of them. Um, it there's this weird orphan kind of feeling. You're kind of like rudderless, you're kind of out to sea. So there were definitely, I wrote a lot, Jake, like a lot of like stanzas, a lot of lyrics, a lot of phrases. Sometimes, and in this case, riding the train and being in New York City was really good for me. Moving, moving all the time. I'm not good with sitting down in grief. Cause it'll just be like, it'll totally paralyze me. So I had to keep moving. The other thing is with my mom passing, she passed in like November and my son was born in February. And so it was just also this weird feeling of like loss and then this amazing joy. And I remember also what was crazy is that Zach was born and then Four Trips put out a record and it was like all around the same time and it was so exciting and it was all this positive stuff. So my grief with my mother was kind of interesting. It was almost deferred a little bit. And I was writing my solo record and all this was happening. So I definitely think that some of it was more of a kind of just sitting in process. And it's not so neatly broken down. Like we're like, okay, now I'm going to process what happened with me and I'm going to write these songs about it. Usually it just comes out. There was a lot also, as you pointed out when we started the interview, there's so much been going on in our country too. And just like the energy that's around, good and bad, that kind of was happening. All of this kind of was like a maelstrom and just kind of came into being and it would hit me in different ways. And then so some of it was very direct. One of the songs, Security, is straight up about my parents. And that was kind of an older song that I kind of revamped a bit. And it really kind of hit a lot of things I wanted to say and do. It's one of the more reflective parts of the record. And that's something that means a lot to me. The opening line is none of my four parents gave themselves up for fear. And then from there, you kind of like it just sets the stage. So it's more like kind of stories and the tipping of my hat to the life lessons you pick up. But then there's a lot of joy on the record, like Move Closer and which is almost kind of like this like a it's somewhere between punk and speed metal in places and just totally carousing and it's like and some days I'm open, some days I'm crawling. So I talk also about that idea of trying to make sense of all of these things that kind of turn your world around. So like it sometimes creeps into lyrics in this way. So Move Closer, for example, I wrote it all and we put the music together and it's really heavy. Um, and some of the stanzas are kind of about like I don't really want to process what's going on. I just kind of want to release and I want to make a lot of noise about it. And I'm angry about it, but I'm also joyful about certain things. It's kind of like being in these different cross waters. So like a song like that was like I finished it. We actually recorded it. I finished the lead vocal and we're listening, and then I really listened to the lyric and I was like, oh wow. And I actually felt my stomach drop in a couple places. I was like, oh, okay, this is a little much. Um, and then and then other songs mean other things, but yeah, I agree. I think that some of the stuff was cathartic immediately when writing whatever, when I realized what it was. Playing music in general, definitely, I don't know how I would have been able to kind of get through everything without it. But I think on top of it, it just kind of a lot of stuff creeps in and you just allow it, like I was talking about the muse, you just allow it to kind of do what it does and then see, the solo record that I put out, Freedom's Door, is very personal. And so I'm trying to be unafraid with a lot of what you're talking about and a lot of other things and just kind of in a way that with Four Trips, I want to be a little bit more sensitive to everyone being in the band. And I think some of the lyrics are a little more general and sometimes you have to dig in another way. With my solo record, there are songs like that, but there's a lot of stuff where I'm kind of wearing my heart on my sleeve, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. And speaking more about the people in your corner, Glenn Sherman and and Harold, the bassist, were two of your closest friends that are featured on the album. And when you look back on your friendship, what's one particular quality you can say about both of them that is a testament to its endurance?
Yeah, so those cats are like people I really love and respect greatly as musicians and as people. And like you said, I love the way you put it, like people in your corner. They're incredible musicians. You know, I've known Glenn since I was 18 years old, and I saw him and his band play after my band at the time, and his old band played, and I was floored by his band, and they really liked us. They were checking us out, and we just it was just one of those weird things. There's just timing, and we just really dug each other, and we kept ending up on bills together, which was really funny, because we weren't smart enough to kind of say, hey, we should put a bill together. We just kind of were like, wow, you're great, and we would we exchange numbers, and we end up playing somewhere months later, like, wait a minute, we're on the same bill with them again. And so our audiences shared and everything, and we just kind of had this friendship. And so Glenn is just he blew me away as a guitar player, as a singer, and as a performer, and just his whole vibe. And I really value that we lost touch at times, and we kind of would find each other. And so when I was working on the solo record, I was like, I want him involved. And it's been great because he's like this awesome father, musician, writer, just terrific, and his playing is tremendous. He's as good as anyone you've ever heard, and then some. Just really unique player, and just so musical and talented and loving. And Harold, I knew about a year or two after Glenn, so I've known him since I was about 19 or so, and just this beautiful, beautiful person that I love, that actually I have been able to keep in contact with. I used to go see him perform all the time. He has a great prog band that plays called Ad Astra that still is performing and writing music, and he's just tremendous. And ironically, we never had a reason to like play together. And then when the solo thing came up, I was like, I just want him to be the bass player. And Carol was actually the first person. I was like, if he's my bass player, this whole thing is going to be cool, because I wanted to be kind of a tight knit band that was the core of a lot of the songs. And Harold and Glenn certainly make up that as well. And the drums were split up between Nick Cipriano, who's like my secret weapon, producer, engineer extraordinaire, who I work with, who played drums for a while on Four Trips, and we were in between drummers. He's amazing. And then I have Ken, who's the drummer from Four Trips, who played the other half of the record. So and then there's Phil Ortiz, who brings this. He wrote with me and Ken all these newer songs. We almost wrote a whole other album's worth, and we picked like about half of those songs to go on this record. And that was just great because he brings this like punky, energetic, youthful style that's really great. And against bringing them all together has been amazing. But having Glenn and Harold on the record has been and just involved with my life. And I talk to him like every other day or every couple days about it. They're as excited about the record as I am. And it means a lot to me because, as you go in the music industry, you start to realize that it's really hard to find. You can find great players, but to find a chemistry between people and to make sure that they're breathing life into your songs in the way you want them to, that's very rare. There are a lot of great artists out there that put out records that I can hear that sometimes the music just sounds very manufactured. Nothing wrong with it, but it sounds like a lot of things you've heard with maybe another singer or something like that. And what was very important to me on Freedom's Door is that I was able to put out a unique statement that really was true to the songs, and that yeah, it would be a big rock album, but that it would be something a little new. That there would be something in the sauce where someone would be like, "Wow, that's a little different," and I hear this voice, and who is this, and what is this about? And I think the players matter a lot, and Glenn and Harold and everyone in the band really bring that in terms of the music and in terms of the sound to life in a way that I knew they would.
That's what I was going to bring up after your point. Do you feel that all of the musicians that you have involved, they understand the importance of not only being good players, but being kind to one another?
Yeah, I definitely feel. I mean, what's been really great about my solo band and stuff, and like we rehearse pretty much weekly now because we want to book some shows and we're hoping to do some touring and there was this willingness. Like people were like, okay, the record's in. They're like, okay, what are we going to play together? What are we going to play out live and do all this? There was this real enthusiasm behind the songs and the music, which really excited me because I was hoping that we would just get through a record together and people would be cool, and it's really taken on an interesting life of itself. Like we all kind of we hang, we talk, we laugh together after rehearsals, we chat with each other and send each other these ridiculous things via text. Like there's been this camaraderie and real friendships that have been brought together and evolved because of this album. And I think the songs speak to that. And that's why I think that there's, I mean, Jake, I think you remember with Four Trips, I record my solo stuff the same way. Everyone's in a room, we're in the studio together at Spin, we're all looking at each other and we're playing. So it's not like the basic tracks for all this stuff, and even some of the lead vocals on this, some of them are, a lot of them are like, first performance or one of the takes that we did, because I believe very much in people looking at each other and we're playing, and there's emotion behind what everyone's doing. And then once you have that basic awesomeness, if you have that great take, we can then color it. We build on it like good records do. Glenn did a lot of magical, he records all his guitars other than the basic ones at his home studio, and he just knows what to do and it sounds tremendous. Um, but like, and I did a lot of vocals. I come in and do more background vocals or recut parts or harmonies and things like that. But we kind of like, it was very important to me that like the core, the center was killer. So that if you stripped away all that stuff, you still have a great song and great performances. And I think that the way you do that is by playing with people in the room and start to respect one another. And I think that everyone's really in that space, which is really remarkable because very often you can make a killer record with great players, but not everyone's available, or people are kind of like, oh, well, I just want to make the record and that's it, and good luck, or I just want to get paid or whatever. And that's not been the case with this band, and these players, these musicians. And I feel very, very lucky to have this whole other family outside of Four Trips that really believes in my art and believes in the album Freedom's Door.
As far as mixing and mastering, you have Nick Chimbukas and then Roger Leon. How do they gel with each other and really bringing out and emphasizing the soul of the album?
That's a great question. I would also add one other person, major player there, which is Nick
Yeah,
Cipriano,
yeah,
who's
of
like,
course. Because he's
right,
been there from day one, right?
yeah, he's the magic sauce, right? So not only does he show off how great he is and how talented he is of an individual, because he not only mixed the album and engineered a lot of it, but he also played drums on half the album too. I mean, he's just an amazing player. And Nick's Cipriano, as you know, is kind of like in the Four Trips Ahead circle too, as is, actually as is everybody you named, right? Nick Chimbukas is a killer engineer, great musician, great guitar player and singer. He was in a band in the 90s called Collision
Yeah.
that put out two amazing records. And he's gone to become a really big producer. He works with Alex Skolnick and the Alex Skolnick Trio. He's done like so many things in the metal, hard rock, and even pop and Euro kind of music world. He puts out and engineers and produces so many great records. So he can do everything from pop to extreme metal. He's just really, really tremendous. And he and I have been friends for many years. So there's a trust factor with him that I really appreciate. I have it with him and Nick Cipriano. And Nick actually moved back out west. So he's kind of on the West Coast. So, when after he tracked his stuff and we engineered and did, and then the sessions, the second group of sessions, he couldn't play drums because he wasn't available. And we were dealing with a pandemic and all sorts of stuff. So that's when I brought Ken in to play drums. But the three of them, in terms of production, I mean, both Nick Cipriano and Nick Chimbukas, in terms of engineering and capturing stuff, have just been phenomenal. They both were able to track my lead vocals. They're both really encouraging. They know to let me just do my thing, and then we listen, and then they give really candid answers and responses, and I trust them. But what was nice about this, unlike with Four Trips, where there are other individuals, is kind of me sitting back and going, okay, how do I feel with this? And them really understanding what I was going for. I usually come into the studio very prepared too, and they work really quickly and are very excellent at what they do. So we're really just trying to catch a vibe and make sure that lyric and vibe and performance all match up and are linked and are great. Once we captured the record, it was mixed with Nick Cipriano mixed it and just would send me stuff, and I'd make comments, and we go back and forth. It was really exciting getting these like mixes. We took our time and really said we're going to work one. We're not going to just say okay, he's going to set up everything and just mix everything in a few days. I like projects like that. With the solo record, I wanted it because we had some different players, and I was figuring about really making this powerful statement. Nick Cipriano would send me a track and be like, okay, live with this for a couple days, and then let's talk about it. So I was really, really lucky to have that. Again, he's someone that believes in my voice and believes in my talent and has been so supportive. And because he's worked with me in Four Trips and he works with Four Trips, he knows what like the special spots are with my voice. He understood very much this is a solo record, and as a result, that the voice and where the vocal is very important. Um, and he got what I was going for as a mission. And then Roger Leon, who's mastered the last I think three or four Four Trips releases. He's just, I mean, he is like a total tremendous sonic like doctor, right? So he's worked with everyone from Madonna to Rush to everything in between. So his talents, like he just brings everything to the fore. He did a wonderful job doing three different masters of this record, one for streaming, one for the CD, and one for the vinyl, which I hope will come out down the road, right? So he really understands sound in a way that's just amazing. He knows what I'm trying to capture, and as a master, he's just phenomenal. And I really admire him because he's worked with such big artists, but he takes my work just as seriously as anyone else's. And he's been a fan of Four Trips. He's come down to see us play, shows up and just checks us out. He's unlike a lot of people who have been in the industry for a long time, who do sound and mix and whatever, who've seen it all. He's not jaded, which is really, I know it sounds simple, but it's really rare to find someone that's like has this
It
incredible
is.
career, and still wants to work with new artists, still like pushes, like he'll go up on his page and promote my record or Four Trips
Still
or
has the itch to work with new
yeah,
artists.
yeah. He's excited and he puts out, he's still, whatever work he does, whatever I hear him doing as a mastering engineer, is just really great. And like I said, he doesn't take shorts, and he did a go around. And then he kind of said to me, Peter, I want to live with this for a few more days. And then he contacted me a week later. He goes, all right, I'm going to master this again. And then I want you to tell me what you think. And I could hear minor things that were done that really made the record that much greater. So having this incredible team, also I want to give a shout out to Pete Benjamin, Spin Studios, who are just like my home away from home. I love recording there. It is my spot forever. It's just such a welcoming environment for artists and bands and musicians, and it just like I feel super comfortable there, so I don't have to worry about anything. And having that dream team working on the record made it that much more magical. And that's why I feel like I'm really proud of it. I know it sounds huge. I know the songs are kick ass. I'm very much like, hey, I hope you're about this. Um, so yeah, so it was a very, very rewarding to get those final mixes and the final master of the record and be able to kind of be like, okay, we have this. This is right.
And you mentioned the mixing and mastering process, and you mentioned a very specific point of Nick specifically telling you, live with this for a couple days, process it, kind of let me know what you think. Were there any times where, despite their experience, despite their proclivities and know how to do things, you listened to something and you were like, I think we're at like different pages in this construction.
Well, I would say to you that definitely, the good thing about working with these folks is they really get me and they know what I'm after. And actually, we spend a little bit of time talking about like, what are we, what are we going for here? And so they're very clear about, what I'm going for and what's happening. And in case there's ever a point where they're like, which direction you want to go? Or we talk about before it's actually, before sometimes, I mean, we'll track things and then they'll say, okay, so what are we going for? They always know that I want the big rock mix and I want things to be really great. I like things to be very hot and I also like there to be subtlety when it's needed. So we have really good conversations. Honestly, a lot of that, and that, that comes down to, and I know this sounds kind of corny again and cliche, but I really believe in pre-production. You got to have really killer musicians. You got to rehearse the hell out of your stuff. You have to know what you're going for. And you go in, like when I go in the studio, I go in with a mission. I know what I want, my lyrics all around me, so I have the vibe, and not just to remember the lyric, but also the energy of I wrote these lyrics. I don't type up my lyrics. I have little a little thing about that. I think it's handwritten. It's your soul. It's the message you're putting out.
Right, you're not
What?
just staring at a screen.
Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't know how people like. I watch people sometimes. Like I've seen a lot
That's
of the
your
more
eyes,
modern.
though. Like
Well, it's just a weird thing to me. There's like this object there.
when you see
Uh,
like rappers like over the past I don't know decade or so, and they're reading a rap that they wrote like or that they composed on their phone, and they make it very clear that they're holding the phone, that their lyrics are.
like I don't, but it's not just. I'll tell you, hip hop artists I think are a little more obvious about it, and they kind of do, and they do a modern thing, right?
Where's my phone?
But you know what? A lot. I'll tell you, Jake. A lot of newer rock and pop artists do the same thing. And you know what? I don't. So
They
here's what I'll say.
literally hold their phones, like hold the phone.
But everyone's got a different
Yeah,
relationship with what they do, right? So like
absolutely.
for me, I find like the social media stuff and all that, that's on top of what I'm doing. But first I'm all about, I like it to be like closed off. Like my wife and son, who I love to death, they visited me once in the studio at the when I was listening for mixes, one of the final mixes. They came by for like 15 minutes. That was it. They're not involved in any of the other stuff, not because I don't love them and I don't want them to hear it, but I feel very much like when I'm doing this thing,
Right,
I'm
it's a
doing this
different kind of space, right?
different energy for me and space to be in, and I just know that when I'm going to be most productive and strong. So I like a certain setup and studio. I also don't like a lot of bells and whistles going on when I'm singing and tracking. I don't like a lot of effects. I like it to be really dry. There's certain things that I like. There are other singers that are very different. I also use like it's always a joke that the guys at Spin always try like different really expensive mics with me, and we always go back to the old beat up mic that like Michael Jackson recorded pretty much all of Thriller and a lot of his early, and I believe Off the Wall on, just like a simple $300 mic. My voice sits on that mic better than others. So those are certain things that you like learn about, like, hey, your instrument, what you do, and whatever. I don't get like, I come from like I'm from Queens, so like all my friends who are like serious hip hop artists and heads, they like you had to know all your stuff off the dome. You were like either freestyling or you really knew your lyrics, or you had like a lyric book. Like very that was your thing.
Book of
Like I
rhymes, right?
yeah, with rhymes or whatever. A lot of my lyrics are sometimes they're straight up melodies and lyrics and they come together. Other times I just have an observance where I'll write a line down. Like in one of the songs on my album, Freedom's Door, one of my friends was talking to me about like just some of these, idiot right wing, very racist,
Yeah.
prejudiced guys. And I think we might have been talking about I don't think it was about Charlottesville, but it was about one of those kinds of events. And I just said, "Oh man, that's like so those guys are just dicks and swastikas." He like burst out laughing. He was like, "Oh my god, that's amazing!" And I laughed too, and I wrote down dicks and swastikas because I just thought it was a funny phrase and something to have. And then when Charlotte, I think when some of the events of what was going on was happening, um, I kind of wrote this whole piece that became Dixon Swastikas on my record, which is really dealing with that anger and that frustration over our country's inability to move forward. And in that we're in the 21st century, still dealing with murder of people of color and Black people in particular, whether it be by certain law enforcement or if it just be by some of the misunderstanding we have in the streets, the anti-Semitism we're seeing, the anti-immigrant feelings, the anti-Asian feelings. And New York, we were seeing all of this stuff happen, and it was really, really daunting. And to me, it's just Dixon swastikas, right? It becomes like this penis thing and this false sense of belief and this really twisted way of seeing the world, right? But all that comes to me going back to like your original question about all the stuff in like direction and like being able to focus. I've been able to work with people that really get where I'm from. So we talk, we have these long conversations. I mean, with Nick Cipriano, we always have a dinner or two where we just kind of meet up and we talk. Like he's already agreed to do the record. I know what's going to be on the record or whatever. But we talk a little bit about like the technical stuff and the dates and everything. But we just kind of hang out. We just have dinners and we talk and talk a little bit about the songs and talk about so what are you going for, what are we doing, and we in doing that you're feeling each other out and going okay, and then we've locked in even if we've never said it. There's kind of just this understanding like okay, now that we've kind of did this touch base, we're ready to go make this record, and that's really that's exciting. And I purposely work with people like that so I don't have to over explain what I'm doing. I can just do the work. And what's interesting about this question, Jake, is that I've been watching this series on YouTube about Sunset Studios, where all these recordings and Prince recorded a lot there. I'm a huge Prince fanatic, I think, as you know, and stuff. So what was so interesting to me and related to your question is just they're interviewing a lot of the engineers and people like Susan Rogers, like these geniuses, right, who worked with all these great artists. But she would talk very often about how you'd set up the studio and just have everything ready, and he would just go and create tracks, right? But there wasn't like conversation. It was kind of like everything had to be in tune and things had to be a certain way in the way they were. And sometimes they weren't even perfect in the way it was. It was just the way that he liked it. So that he didn't have to think about that. And then once everything was kind of recorded and tracked, he'd kind of listen and have some ideas. I mean, he obviously Prince was a genius, so he had a whole vision coming in. I'm not anywhere near on that level of musical understanding and conversation, but as an artist myself and as a singer and as a producer and someone that makes records and knows what I'm going for, I definitely can tell you from my vantage point the kind of music I want to make. So I try to work with people that would get it. Like I said, I've met some people I love that are incredible musicians, but wouldn't be necessarily right for what I'm doing. And that's okay. Just as I know that like my voice, works really well within the context of what I'm doing. I'm not a pop singer by
Right,
any
and it's
stretch.
not to denigrate their workflow or what they're used to do or their talents or them as people. It's just like you do like what you work best in.
Yeah, exactly. And where I thrive. And you can hear that in the record, right? Because you can hear the enthusiasm, you can hear the connection, because that's where I'm sitting and that's where I'm, most honest. I guess going back full circle, it's kind of like, I know we keep bringing up the Our Lady Peace thing, but I really felt a lot of those records, right? Like when you hear some of those records, you really felt a lot of what was going on, like I always think about that song "Right There Behind You," which was a single that I thought was, I think the chorus is no matter what you say, no matter what you do, I'll be right there behind you. You felt that like he's going through this stuff, and it's like there was this conversation that Rain Maida had with like fans and they're connected, and I used to love listening because Rain is a great example to me of someone who has a unique voice, not my favorite singer or technically great singer, but it was very real and like something I can connect with. Like I heard it and I believed him when I heard him, which is why like I'm hoping that we'll find that in later music. I know that he's doing other kinds of stuff, but I feel like that's really important. At the end of the day, I feel like, yes, you want to be great in your instrument. Yes, you want to be a good musician, everything, but I have to believe it when I hear it. And I don't care what kind of music it is. I don't care if it's like hip hop or if it's metal or if it's reggae music, which is super important to me, or if it's like hard rock or even pop. If I believe it, when I hear the vocal, I believe the performance, it's going to translate in a way that sometimes other songs won't, you know? That's just the reality of it, you know?
Yeah, and you you make a really good point just um, simply bringing all of that together. And we talked about the sound that you're going for, which I really appreciate. And as another point to that, like I really like the placement of the tracks throughout the album. I like how Release is track number one because this is basically your time to want to release and like getting everything out in the open. And I really like how Mirror was placed in the mid to late kind of part of the album. And I also like, you mentioned Dixon swastikas. I had a bit of a different image of Dixon swastikas. Um, back in the, obviously this is before my time. I'm only 33, but back in the 70s when you'd see like images of those grimy bathrooms and you'd see like graffiti on those like really like late 70s walls, and what would there be? Like dicks and swastikas all over the
Yep.
walls.
Yeah, you totally, well, you actually nailed it. That's why my friend and I thought it was so funny because there's that other aspect of it. That's all I thought when I was a kid and I'd be in the stall in the bathroom and peeing and you'd look, like a public place or whatever. And you said Dixon swastika is what you'd see. So that's why I thought it would be really funny to kind of take that imagery. Because I mean, at the end of the day, and I'm not to make light of hate or whatever,
Yeah.
but you gotta laugh about the lack of intelligence because you imagine like these guys took time to like scrawl a swastika or a penis on like on like the bathroom stalls. Like, what kind
Dedication,
of
pal.
I want you to feel it. Like, well, you're taking a piece. I want connect with my like message. It's like what? Like I mean, and that's kind of the humor. You totally nailed it. That's like the humor, and I think that went on. I think it still goes on. I was somewhere. I think I was at a restaurant somewhere, like kind of somewhere downtown, and I saw like I remember it was kind of like not quite posh, but kind of a hipster kind of restaurant. And I'm in the urinal, kind of doing my business, and on the upper left corner, I saw someone did like a little penis, and I thought, gotta love it. You know what I mean? Like even really classy, and you think about that. So that's why I thought that song kind of releases in a funny way there, because it's kind of like making fun of that whole. I mean, it's talking about a serious subject, but also kind of, at the end of the day, it's dicks and swastikas. That's where your toilet like mentality, humor, all that, your soul almost is kind of like trapped in these really, you know, very non-poetic, simplistic kind of ways of how you respond to human beings. So yeah, you totally nailed that. That's correct.
Yeah, and for the last track of Freedom's Door, I kind of like how that's placed as the final track because you kind of, when you think of a, a track name like that, like I was talking with Mercury. He's in the band Priest, but he used to play bass in the band Ghost, and he was saying that the the title of your song like kind of informs the music. And I was thinking back to that because I was like, when I think of a track like Freedom's Door, you kind of expect it to be the opener, but instead it's the last track, and it fits right. It fits naturally in its placement as the last track because it's like the only track that doesn't really hits you right away. It kind of builds before you get into it, and you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Freedom's Door is kind of funny. It was one of the last, if not the last song written for the record. Um, and it
So it
was
was
kind
the
of,
last song written, and it was the last track on it. Wow, the
yeah,
synchronicity.
yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because we kept calling it like the epic song, and I was fine with that. I actually felt like the only thing the record didn't have was this epic kind of thing, and then we started writing. Me, Phil, and Ken wrote that, and it was one of those moments where just kept writing, and the parts just kept flowing and coming out, and it became this thing, and just got longer and more heavy. And then when I found like the lyrical kind of, I found the aha moment where I was like, okay, this is where this song is going to go, and what I'm saying here, and it just kind of all fell together very naturally, very quickly, and and it was a little bit intimidating for me because the song meant so much to me. I wanted to make sure we captured it well, and so we tracked it, and it was very heavy to do, and it caught a vibe. We had done a couple takes, and we did. I remember it was the third take of it that it just sat in, and we were like, okay, that was it. And then when the guys went in and kind of added some guitars and tweaked some things, um, I then I then going back to talking about Charlottesville, I went in to go do Freedom's Door was the only song on the album that I hadn't been working on. I kind of went back and did background vocals. I did all the leads on everything else. Everything was done. And Nick Chimbukas kept saying, "Hey man, when are we gonna do that one?" I was like, "Okay, we'll get there," because I knew lyrically it would mean a lot, and I would have to really. I want to be very present in a certain headspace with it. And so we finally, the album was done, like everything was done actually, for the most part, with the exception of Glenn's guitars, which he added to Freedom's Door, but everything was essentially done. And I went in to track the lead for Freedom's Door, and we just kind of sat there and really made it like a thing. And it happened to be the anniversary of Charlottesville. We didn't realize that until halfway through the session. I'd finished the lead vocal and was ecstatic, and very happy with how it came out. So we took a little bit of a food break. We'd ordered food and turned on the TV, and we saw the images from Charlottesville again. Um, and I remember it was very quiet. It was just me and Nick Chimbukas, and Nick turned to me and said, "Wow, there's some heavy vibes in you doing this song today of all days." And I said, "Yeah, it was crazy." And we spent that evening finishing and building the track, and it gave the song, and I think the heaviness of the track even that much more of a pleading feeling, of an angry feeling, of all these other emotions. And I think it shows up. It's actually one of my favorite things I've ever captured in terms of my performance and just the overall sentiment of it. It means a lot to me, and I'm super proud of it. And then Glenn heard everything, and I wanted a few extra guitars to give some more shade to the recording, after Phil and Harold and Ken did such a great job with the track. And then Glenn took it. He heard the vocal and was like, "Wow!" He's like, "I want to. So let me live with this for a week, and I think I can come up with some really cool stuff." And he did, and it just was. It was just really perfect. So yeah, I feel like that song had to end the record. I felt like it's kind of like you're in this journey, as I said. It's kind of this statement, but my album is a journey, and kind of we're left with Freedom's Door, which kind of is asking a lot of questions and making demands and wondering where we are, you know. So yeah, so I appreciate you recognizing like where it belonged on the album.
And like considering the album as a whole, one of the, I mean, I think back to the time where I first interviewed you, and one of the first things that you and I connected on was when we first heard Goldilocks from King's X, and we both started crying, and like it brought me back to the time you mentioned. Uh, you forming that connection with Doug Pinnick. And I was envisioning him listening, not only listening to Freedom's Door, the album, but singing it. And I was like, damn, he'd be so proud of you.
Oh, thank you so much, Jake. That means a lot to me. I love Doug, what Doug's about, as you know, and it's funny because they just, I think, the Silent Planet just celebrated some anniversary. In one of my circles, they talked about it. I listened to, all those King's X records mean so much. I love the last thing they just put out just recently, their last recording, and I got to see them not long ago with Jimmy Hazel and 24/7 Spies playing before them, and that was a wonderful, magical night. But yeah, I mean, that means a lot to me. Doug Pinnick was a huge influence on me. He made me, as I think I told you years ago, or maybe I didn't, but I'll tell you, he made me feel like my voice was okay. And it's hard to describe to people because if you're growing up in the 80s and like kind of like looking at the pop culture that was out there, particularly around MTV and hard rock. When I say pop culture, I mean hard rock, kind of the pop metal culture that was flooding everything, right? I loved a lot of the music, but my voice is so not like those singers. Every guy singer had to have like blonde hair and have this
Yeah,
helium
but
voice.
Doug was black, but he was also older. He was so much older than everyone else there. So that contributed to his uniqueness. It wasn't some old guy trying to be trendy. It was him
Right.
using his unique experiences to just make the best impact he could be, even if it wasn't totally commercially successful. It was his own following.
Right. And that's what I mean. You hit the nail on the head. Like, so, you're watching a sea of these kinds of videos, whatever. And I start to get more and more into underground music. I was so into, I mean, I love the Bad Brains and Fishbone and
Yeah,
things
yeah.
like there was all this stuff. And even stuff like, by the late 80s, it was like Jane's Addiction grabbed me and they had Faith No More. And you had like things were changing. That's why a lot of times when people kind of try to blame Kurt Cobain for the end of this like caramel thing, I think it's a bunch of garbage. Things were changing before that if you really were paying attention. But King's X, what was so great for me when I first saw them and was able to witness their, I guess, their first major show in New York City, and just being the age I was, and I saw Doug and just the way the whole band looked, the way he sang, the way he, like you said, to your point, they were just like they were pretty much like, hey, this is who we are. They were a fully realized sound. They've been playing for a long time, and they just, again, talking about that muse, they just had all this stuff to share, and it was beautiful. It was dark. It was happy. It was like all these emotional things. And I remember, and like the lyrics were great, because lyrics, a lot of lyrics are a lot of stuff that even the fun stuff we like, a lot of stuff was just crap. And I was like, I can't feel myself singing that. And here all of a sudden I see King's X. And then for me, it was after seeing King's X, I saw Living Color and like I said, all these other bands I named. And you see 24/7 Spies and Living Color, and you see Faith No More and Jane's Addiction and King's X, and you're like, wait a minute. I can write really great lyrics and I can write things that matter that don't have to be about girls and cars and money or just like silly stuff that I couldn't connect with, in the same way that people were singing them. Or, and I started to really, it hit me in a lot of ways. It was just an interesting time. And so, you saying that to me means a lot because I wanted this record to really project who I am and where I'm at, the questions I'm asking, because sometimes I don't have answers, right? We don't have answers. Freedom's Door for me is kind of a great example. That song is a great example of like wanting to know and like having certain questions and wanting to know why we can't progress. Why can't we move past this? Why can't I open freedom's door, so to speak? So that means a lot to me. And hopefully Doug will be able to hear it at some point. I just finally got my CDs today because everyone had been getting the album and saying really nice things online. I was like, I haven't even gotten a physical copy, and I got my copy today. So hopefully, he'll be able to support it as well.
Hmm.
So
And another thing I wanted to mention that you've done pretty regularly as long as I've known you. I mean, sure, I don't know you in person, but whether we meet or not in the future, I'm just glad to say I know you. So,
I
with
think
that context, as long as I've known you, you've also done these posts where um, you'd emphasize the decal on your turntable now spinning, and I was always kind of inspired along the way to check out what you've been listening to, and you've been posting stuff like DeBarge, Tangier, and Dwell, and it's obviously an eclectic mix. And now I saw you posted this morning, Winston Jarrett and the Righteous Flames. I mean, when you listen to these things, are these albums that you listen to regularly, or is it a case where you haven't listened to, a specific album, and then the moment you put it on, like after not hearing it for a long time, you're like, man, this feels great. Like I needed this.
that's a great question. Yeah, so like I'm always, whenever I get a chance to be at home and listen, I love listening to music. I mean, that's what I do. I don't, honestly, and people who know me, like if I don't turn on TV, I could live, and I lived for a long time. I didn't actually own, when I moved out in my own little apartment, my little studio in Queens, I didn't own a television for like most of those years. I think something like, 16 years, 15 years I was living on my own. Before I got married and everything, I didn't own a television because, and I think some of that was really cathartic to me. I like TV and I love movies, but I just felt like I really wanted to just immerse myself in writing music, listening to music. I think being a great musician means you're a student of music. So I think, I constantly like listening and discovering stuff. I have friends of mine who are great musicians who also share great music they love. And I have friends of mine who are awesome DJs. Some of them are really for particular types of music. Some of them are general DJs, and they post things, and it always gets me excited. We share stories about records. So it's a mixture for me. Sometimes, like this morning, I was listening to Liquid Jesus, Pour in the Sky, which I think is one of the greatest records that nobody heard in the 90s. Just absolutely brilliant, brilliant group produced by Michael Beinhorn, who went on to become this huge producer, produced Soundgarden and Ozzy and all these
And
artists.
you know me, I
Uh,
love underground 90s.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
my
yeah.
bread
So
and
they were,
butter.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So some of it for me, the now spinning is like a fun thing to share with like people that follow my music and people are just friends with me or who are in the industry and checking out. Um, for me, the now spinning sometimes if it's a newer release, obviously it's like, hey, you'll see me say sometimes like first listen or whatever. Like I've been checking out the new Black Crowes record or in the case of a group like 11, who I loved, who were criminally ignored as well.
Reach
Um,
out. That one.
yeah, it was a great group. Natasha and the folks in 11 are just absolute. Alan Johannes, who's
Yeah, yeah.
incredible, just an incredible
It was an
writer and music.
anthem. It was like pre Chili Peppers and all that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then they grabbed Jack Irons, right?
Yeah.
And they just put out their last record. I think he was able to get the rights back for their last album, The Howling Book. So I got that on vinyl, which is great because it's one of those great records I loved on CD. That like you weren't sure you'd ever see the light of day on vinyl. So to get something like that, I love to share. And a bunch of my friends were like, "Wait a minute, Peter, I loved 11. You turned me on to them. They're on vinyl." I'm like, "Yeah, at least the last record is." So some of that is for to share with people like, hey, you should check this out. But most of the time when I'm listening to music, I'm not like saying up for audience. I'm kind of saying up for me, like where's my head at? What am I feeling like? In the case of something like DeBarge or whatever, one of the songs, like I don't know if this happens to you, Jay, because you listen to a lot of music too, right? We're constantly listening to music. So sometimes the weirdest things will happen. I'll be like shaving or I'll be like, on the bus and a song will fly in my head. I'm like, wait, what song is this? And I'm like, oh my God, that's whatever it is. And it's not necessarily the single or whatever else. Or sometimes there'll be a couple of songs, like it'll be a sound that will follow it with me. And then I'll kind of like throw it on, like, and ask the jazz artists like Omar, who I worship and think is one of the greatest composers in the 20th century and 21st century. I love Omar's work. So in my head, when I listen to Omar, I hear a bunch of songs. So I'll swim in him for 2 or 3 albums in a row because I just love what he does. And I kind of want to immerse myself in that sound. Other times, like something like Winston Jarrett or something like reggae stuff. Reggae, obviously my father's from Jamaica, so you know that it's so part of who I am and like what I love. So I find a lot of times, quite honestly, dealing with being surrounded by a lot of negativity, it's very important for me to listen to reggae music. I can't emphasize it enough. I know it sounds kind of weird, but like reggae music to me, really good roots reggae music is life affirming for me. So I always feel if I'm having like a moment where you're reading like a bunch of terrible news or just stuff going on like we're seeing in Israel and with Israel and the Palestinians going on, we're seeing what's happening in Ukraine with Russia and Ukraine or whatever, or just seeing like the migrant crisis
Mm.
and the emphasis in New York City in the streets and these folks who are just trying to find a place to live and to eat and their kids going to school, that can weigh heavy on you. It does on my soul. Like I feel it. Sometimes I feel like I'm going to bed feeling, and my life is fine, but I'm feeling just around me. There's a lot of stuff and reggae music to me is really life affirming and it centers me. So I really love listening to reggae music early in the morning, first thing. I think it creates a different aura and energy for me. So just putting on one really great roots record can just make me feel like, okay, reggae is the music that goes close to your heartbeat, right? So they say. So I think that has a lot to do with it. And the idea that we're dealing with some heavy times, so we're going to get through it and there's this kind of sensibility with that music. But I feel that way about a lot of music. But reggae music is a great place for that for me. I love that, and then and then I can kind of start my day and go all over the place. Listen, some mornings I wake up and I'm just like metaled out, so I'm like I'm going for it. But then I would say to your point, there's some records and some artists, and definitely during the recording of Freedom's Door, when I was in production phase, big time. So the record is done in terms of tracking, and I'm just saying, okay, let's listen to mixes. Let's listen to like, is this the right mix? Is this going? Is this? It's really I go back to certain records and certain artists that the albums that really sound great to me and are things that like I'm like, yeah, this is immediate. So I'll go grab like Thin Lizzy stuff, particularly mid 70s to their last album, Thunder and Lightning.
Oh
I
my
listened to
God.
those records. Yeah, like right, is my especially for my solo record for Freedom's Door, I want certain things to kind of cut through, and I always love that about Lizzy albums where Phil's voice sits in a certain place, and it has a certain character. Even though a lot of stuff is heavy, I'll often comment to people around me like, "Wow, I know this is a pop song, but listen to how loud the drums are in this song, for example." Or listen how loud, like we talk about Thin Lizzy, like Waiting for an Alibi was a hit single for them in '79 and it starts off and the bass is really loud. So are the guitars. And I was really blown away by how great the lead vocal is sitting there, but nothing gets compromised in terms of the heaviness of it. There's kind of like this play on it. So I would listen to stuff like that, or I listen to Queen records, or I listen to classic Kiss albums, or I listen to or even some like
It's
Aerosmith's Get Your
interesting
Wish.
though because you get into like this vibe. Like I know you can't see it, but like um my other camera is not working, but when I have it on, it'll show like my six guitars that I have in back of me, and you get into those moments where even when you listen to music and you know that you're a guitar player and that you play guitars, you just want to play air guitar. Like
Yeah, man. Yeah, I'm like right. I'm a singer, I sing, as much as I can every week.
or sometimes you even mime sing to the
Of course. Like, what's the thing right? What gets you excited? What gets you going? And what's funny is like also I felt like in producing this record, what am I capturing a feeling so someone else puts this on and goes, man, like, and I know when some of my fans or people that know my music got in contact were like, yo, Peter, release. Oh my God, that song got me going. Like, I had one fan that sent me this message, like, I didn't get past the first song for the first half hour. I was like, yes, that's awesome. I want someone to put on and be like, man, I haven't even gotten like past that first song. It moved me so much. It got me excited. And I think that that's records and listening to music does that for me because I think as a writer and musician myself, like I'm a kind of a sponge. I want to hear what people were doing. It's
Right, we
inspiration.
both kind of function that way.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely do. It's everything,
Hmm. And considering your career thus far, with the stuff you did with Four Trips Ahead and now with your solo album, what have you learned about yourself, not only as a musician, but as a person?
Wow, that's a heavy question. Um,
This is
the
the
first,
standard that I that I used
yeah.
when I interviewed you before.
Um, the main thing I've learned about um, everything that's gone on for the last few years with me as a musician and as a writer and all this stuff is that I can make it happen. I'm able to do it. It's very easy as an artist to, even if you're really talented and you do put out good work,
You get
to feel
so discouraged and like bogged by everything.
it could be very isolating. It could make you feel like, what am I doing this for? Is anyone like listening? Does it matter? And what I've learned over the last few years in making this record, especially, is that I can do it. It does matter. Good music matters. Albums matter, big time. Um, Being able to write music that not everyone's heard and is not necessarily the thing that's being played on the radio or streaming or whatever, it does matter. And that there's spaces for you and you have to create that space. I'm still creating and figuring it out and trying to master like what's a way to make sure that more people get down and hear what I'm doing. But I definitely feel like that's what I've learned most. The other thing when my son was born, I was so excited, but I was and when my wife was pregnant, I was a little worried because I thought to myself, how am I going to balance all these things and still be like a good dad and still be a good husband
A
and be a present?
present dad, you know.
Yeah, and right, like being good and being present, right? Not just being a good provider financially, but being present. And then you start to realize, like, no, man, you got to make those spaces. You can make it all happen. And I watch, Glenn, my guitar player, has two kids and has been making that happen. And Brian from Four Trips Ahead has two kids and is making, and we make it happen. And a lot of it is just being like, hey, I love, you're expanding your circle and of your family and who you love, but it doesn't, if anything, it enriches. And actually I feel like I've become much more focused, like, okay, we're going to rehearsal, let's make this rehearsal count. And I've noticed that rehearsals, my solo writing sessions, my FTA writing sessions we do, everything become much more focused. Like, hey, time is my most valuable commodity is my time, right? So if I'm giving my time to this, I want to really make sure I maximize it. So if anything, it's actually I've gotten even more of a laser focus on what I have to do, and so I've learned that I can accomplish a lot of things I really want to accomplish, and that I have the focus and the impetus to do it. And I'm really excited, and thinking about maybe, I thought this was going to be a one solo record thing and that'll be it for, who knows when. But now I'm thinking maybe I'll do two things at the same time. Now I want to see what spaces that creates. And like I said, it's been very exciting for me because I'm getting a lot of encouragement from the Four Trips Ahead base. Um, and I'm feeling there's a sense of fulfillment. It's good to feel fulfilled. I don't feel filled up. I feel fulfilled. In other words, like I feel really good about where I'm at, and I feel good that I have more this power to kind of write more music that matters, and I can put out things that will really kind of stand the test of time. And like I said, I feel like what I'm really excited is I feel like in 10 years when I listen to Freedom's Door, I think it'll be just as awesome, which I know a lot of artists can't say about everything they put out, but so far I feel really about that, about Four Trips as canon, and I definitely feel that way about Freedom's Door.
Mm-hmm. And lastly, anything you'd like to say to your fans?
I want to say to people that have been supporting me and fans of Four Trips Ahead and my new solo album Freedom's Door, thank you so much for the support. I really appreciate that you're coming on this journey with me and checking out what I've been doing. And you'll be rewarded as such because I think the record is really great and it's really about who I am. And you're going to be super excited about what's in store for Four Trips Ahead in the future because there's some awesome music being written and finished as we speak. And yeah, and I just want to say thank you for for going on this journey with me. And to those of you that haven't heard and are just now checking out what Jake is doing and interviewing me, um, thank you so much for listening and checking out. And I hope you check out Freedom's Door because I think it'll offer something special to you.